Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good Tavach, Shavua Tov. We are learning Mishnah Nazir, Perik Vav, Chapter 6, Mishnah Yud, Mishnah 10. Okay, now we learned previously that if the Nazir cuts his hair after even one of his animals that have to be sacrificed were slaughtered, even one of them, he's supposed to wait till after all three. But if he just went ahead after one of them was shechted, he cut his hair, that could be his tagalachas. His hair cutting is considered valid, and everything goes well. You have to understand that if, let's say, for some reason his tagalachas is not valid, then guess what he has to do? He's got to keep the Naziris for another 30 days, because you cannot cut your hair and you cannot end your term of Naziris with a tagalachas unless it's 30 days, and it's a 30-day growth. So for some reason that taglachas, that cutting of hair, that shaving of his head, wasn't valid for whatever reason, then he's got to do another 30 days. So we said in the previous Mishnah that if he cuts his hair even after the slaughtering of any one of the sacrifices, the head shaving is valid. And now in our Mishnah we have the following case: Gilach ala zevach. He shaved his head after one of his offerings were slaughtered. The nimtza puzzle, and then later it came out that it was invalid. That means the animal was shechted, he cut his hair, and then it came out that the carbon was invalid. So what does it mean? What happened? What happened was that we know the main part of every sacrifice is the srikas hadam, is the throwing of the blood, and if, let's say, the blood spilled before it was done, let's say it became tamei. Let's say it was taken out of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash. All these things invalidate the blood from being thrown onto the Mizbeach, which invalidates the whole sacrifice. Which means that this guy cut his hair on something that didn't turn out to be a kosher sacrifice, a kosher carbon, a valid sacrifice for him. So what happens then? Tiglach psula. His hair cutting is invalid. He's going to have to keep another 30 days. And to be able to bring the sacrifices and end his naziris. Now, if, let's say, after he cut his hair, in this case, he now offered other karbanos, meaning, let's say he cut the chatas was shechted, he cut his hair, the blood went, and the blood became tamei, right? And then after that, he brought the other two karbanos he was supposed to bring, the oil and the shlamim, right? And they were done fine. Everything worked out well with them. Says the Mishnah, and the rest of his sacrifices don't count. They're not. It was a waste. Since he must still observe another 30 days of Naziris, it comes out that he brought those sacrifices before their time, because he's not done. Right? Once it comes out that the first sacrifice was invalidated and his hair cutting was invalid, and now he has to do another 30 days, he's not done. He's not finished. And therefore, the other karbanos that were brought aren't going to count. Even though they were brought at the point where it should have been completed, but at the end of the day, it's not completed, those sacrifices don't count either. So the case in the Mishnah we have so far is that this person, this Nazir, he cut his hair after the shechting, after the slaughtering of one of his sacrifices. That sacrifice, the blood went bad. It got lost. It spilled. It became tamei. It was taken out of the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash, and now that offering is invalid. So his hair cutting is invalid that he needs for, again, the ending the term of the Naziris. He's going to have to keep another 30 days before he could go through that process again. And any carbon that he brought after that hair cutting, even if everything went fine with that, isn't going to count because of the fact that his Naziris term hasn't ended. Okay, so that's the first case. Now we get into another case. And the other case is the following halacha. Every sacrifice that has to be brought is supposed to be brought for its own sake. If you designate an animal as a chatas, then when you shecht it, you're having in mind that it should be a chatas. Or if you're bringing a carbon oila, and you have to have in mind that you're shechting it as a carbon oila. Now, what happens if, for instance, a person was supposed to bring a carbon oila, he designated an animal for an oila, and when it was being shechted, the Kohen had in mind shlamim. So he had in mind shlamim. was supposed to be an oila, was designated as a shlamim, as an oila, burnt offering, and he had in mind shlamim. What happens then? So halacha is that the sacrifice is brought. However, you're responsible. You have not fulfilled your obligation. You took upon yourself to bring a carbon oila, and it wasn't offered as a carbon oila. So therefore, your obligation of the sacrifice that you obligated yourself to bring doesn't count. You didn't fulfill that. You got to bring another one. But that actual animal that now was slaughtered for the wrong purpose, it's brought because it's still a kosher carbon. Just doesn't count for your obligation. The same thing vice versa. If it's supposed to be a shlamim, and he had in mind an oila. However, a carbon chatas that is shachted shaloi lishma, you shacht it not for its designated purpose. You shacht it as an oila. You shacht it as a shlamim. Invalidates it. It is invalid. You cannot continue the process even bringing this animal as a carbon. Okay? Now, we know that the Nazir brings a chatas, an oila, and a shlamim. The three animals that he brings, each one is designated for that sacrifice. So says the Mishna, Kilach ala chata shalei lishma. He went ahead. The animal was being slaughtered. After it was slaughtered, he went ahead and he cut his hair after this slaughtering, but it was a slaughtering shalei lishma. The chatas was offered shalei lishma, meaning, yeah, correct. So it comes out that, and now, so that what we have right now is, right, basically, again, a carbon that's invalid, right? It's invalid. You can't bring the carbon. Mm-hmm. It's as if the blood had spilled. So if he cut his hair on the slaughtering of the chatas, but that slaughtering was done shalei lishma, okay, which therefore makes the whole animal invalid completely, okay, and not only that, the achar kach hevi karbonosav lishman. Then after this, he brought the rest of his animals for their sake. Everything was done fine. Tiglach psula, his hair cutting is invalid because it was done over an animal that was slaughtered that was not a kosher carbon. And meaning that he has to keep his naziris further until he has a 30-day growth. Those other carbonas are also not going to count because they were brought before he ended his naziris. Okay. That's that case. Next, this case now is taking it a step further, but it's going to be in machlokes. Gilach al ha'oila al hashlam shalei lishman. Now let's say the case was that he cut his hair by the slaughtering of the oila or the slaughtering of the shlamim, and they were done shalei lishman. Okay, the oila was done shalei lishman for not for its own designated purpose. The shlamim was done for its not designated purpose. And all the other sacrifices, whichever they may be, if he did it in order, whichever what happens, the other karbanos were brought afterwards, and they were brought for their own sake, kosher v'yosher, right? The chatas was brought lishma. There's no problem with the chatas. Everything else was done fine. Tiglach psula. Tanakama says his hair cutting is invalid, and the other sacrifices don't count. Now here, being that we're talking about the oila and the shlamim that were shalei lishma, not for the designated purpose, were these kosher karbanas? Yes, they are. They will be brought as karbanas. Will they count for him? Don't forget, he did this not just for the sake of bringing sacrifices. He was bringing these animals as part of his naziris, right? As part of his completion of his naziris, what he has to do when he completes his naziris. Do they count for that? No, they don't. He's going to have to bring other sacrifices in order to fulfill that obligation. And therefore, since they don't count for him, his hair cutting is invalid. Because basically what comes out now is that the sacrifices are just like voluntary shlamim, voluntary oila. They don't count for his naziris obligation. They just are an animal that he's bringing. He's bringing an oila, he's bringing a shlamim. Okay, very nice. But that's not fulfilling his obligation as a nazir. And therefore, the Mishna says, if he cut his hair after one of those slaughterings, so although the animal is a kosher carbon, since it doesn't count towards his naziris obligation, the hair cutting is invalid, and therefore the other sacrifices that he brought afterwards that may have been done, lishma, that were done for the designated purpose, are not going to count. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, that carbon does not count for him. Meaning the one that he did shalei lishma will not count for him. He does not fulfill his obligation for what he needs to bring because of his naziris. Aval sha'ar savachim alulay. But the other karbanos that he did after he shaved his head will be valid. Now it's interesting, Rav Shimon does not make a comment explicitly about his hair cutting. However, at the end of the day, the point of Rav Shimon is that his hair, if Rav Shimon says the other karbanos are good, that has to mean that his haircut was good. Because if it wasn't good, the other karbanos wouldn't be good. So therefore, Rav Shimon says like this. At the end of the day, Rav Shimon says, those this carbon that you did shaloi l'shma not for designated purpose, is it kosher? It's kosher. And since it's kosher, if he cut his hair after that one, it's a good haircut. It's a good shaving. It counts. He has fulfilled his tagalachas. He has fulfilled the head shaving that he needs to do at the end of his naziris. Even though that carbon itself does not count for him, as it says, that sacrifice won't count for him. He's got to make it up. He's got to bring another one to make up that obligation. But nonetheless, according to Shimon, if you cut your hair on a kosher carbon, right, that's valid. And therefore the hair cutting is valid. If it's valid, the rest of the karbanos, aval shar zvachim, but the other sacrifices, are they going to count? Why not? He cut his hair, it was a good hair cutting, doesn't have to keep any naziris anymore, and therefore his naziris is over. Those animals were brought in their proper time. The first carbon, he's got to make it up, but he doesn't have to be a nazir anymore. The imgila now. Okay, that's that. So we have a machlekes of an argument regarding that case where the animal that was shechted, shaloi l'shma, not for designated purpose, didn't count for him. However, it was a kosher carbon. Now, so the Mishnah concludes, the imgilach al shloshtan. Let's say he cut his hair al shloshtan. All three were slaughtered. And then he cut his hair. V'nim tzeh mehem kosher, and only one of them lands up being kosher. Of all three, only one of them landed up being kosher. The blood of two of them spilled. The other one didn't spill, was one of them. Okay? And he cut his hair after all three. Okay? After all three were done. Tiglach de kash kshera. His tagalachas is kosher. His haircut is kosher. Because we learned previously that when you cut your hair after one of the sacrifices, even just one sacrifice was slaughtered, you cut your hair, it's valid. So at the end of the day, that's what happened here. He cut his hair after one of them, because only one of them was kosher. So his hair cutting was kosher. Now he's still got to go ahead and bring those other karbanos that got messed up, because since they got messed up, he never brought them. But his hair cutting was valid, because as long as he cuts his hair after one animal is slaughtered and everything goes kosher with it, all he needs is one to be able to cut his hair. That's what happened here. Okay, the other two got messed up. He's got to make them up. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Now, whose fault?